Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lazaga, here with Dubside.
And you're listening to the Dubcast with Dubside.
Dubside has just returned from teaching at the premier Greenland-style event in North America, the Delmarva Paddlers Retreat. And now he's going to tell us all about it.
Yes. Well, this was the first Delmarva returning from COVID. So we had a 2-year hiatus. And we had a good crew there, 80-some people or so. And the biggest new development at that Camp Arrowhead, where it's been held for over 30 years, was a brand new dining hall, a very up-to-date modern facility. And now we don't have to, like, screens on the windows, and if it gets cold, we get chill. We have climate controlled. It wasn't the old cold cement floor from before, and now there's a actual bathroom facilities in there next to the kitchen. It's a bit larger as well, and they've got like dividers. They can section it off into three rooms or one big room. It's kind of an L shape. And so I guess their financial outlook plan is there's money to be made in weddings. So they rent out this nice modern big hall for weddings. They've got the kitchen right there to do the catering. But they had taken all the history off the walls. You had these plaques going back 30 years of, this group of campers won this whatever category thing, and this is, 1979, so-and-so, these guys did this or that. And this stuff was all over the dining hall, all up to the ceilings, just history right there on the wall. But I guess if you're going to get married, you don't want it to look like you're in a summer camp. So they took all that stuff down. I hope they saved it somewhere, but that stuff's all gone, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wanted to do another kayak building event where, people stay there for a week to build a kayak. You come the week before. But they were going to have to do it at a separate place because that weekend before somebody had rented it for a wedding. So in the end, they didn't get enough signups for the build, so they didn't have it this year. But they'll try it again next year. But I guess now we've got to compete with the weddings on the weekends.
Now, talking about weddings, there was a wedding at Delmarva one year, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. It was, yeah. Yeah, but two of the kayakers who'd been coming there for quite some time got married, and I don't know if that was the official ceremony, but it was we made it as if it was, and they were in kayaks, and we had like the kayak line of, how you do it at weddings, like there's the bridesmaids and the groom maid people, whatever they're called.
Yeah, so everybody was in their kayaks, and
yeah, and then we held up paddles, in a V shape, and they paddled upside down V, and then they paddled underneath it. It was no big deal.
Yeah. Now, at the time, people would point to that and would say, "See, I told you this is a cult."
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it's a cult then.
So what else was going on?
So they had rather than a regular Greenland style competition, which over the years in various of the events in the U.S. people have wanted to do like a full-fledged Greenland competition or a shortened version of it. And it's been tried in various forms, but there's never been enough people to really keep it going. And it's generally a couple people are really enthusiastic about it, and other people don't want to bother because they figure they'll never win. But going way back, I think the first couple of times I went to Delmarva, which is almost 20 years ago, they would do these games maybe one afternoon, and just fun stuff. How many strokes does it take, sweep strokes, to paddle your kayak around in 360 degrees, or how long does it take you to do 5 rolls? And there's one where they set up those English gates, like the 2 poles over the water, and then you have to go like figure 8 around and through and backwards and forwards, that sort of thing. You time how fast you can do that. So this year, that one of the women, her name is Jenny Plummer Welker, she's comes even before I was, back late 90s, I think she was coming to this event. And she's off and on come back. So she, as she had done in the past, orchestrated this games thing. There's another guy named Jack Gilman from New York who's involved in the game. So they had it running again. We had 6 games going on, and you could do, there was the rolling with a paddle and rolling with your hand or a north sock, and as many as you can, fast as you can do 5 rolls. And the English Gates one, they had the sweep strokes, and then they had the two-person team, and one person is blindfolded, and they have to paddle out and around a buoy, but the person who's blindfolded has to get instruction from the other person, a little to the left, to the right, that kind of thing. That can be kind of funny. And I think they did harpoon throwing. And so in the end, when they announced, they decided, I think somebody just decided the last minute when they organized, let's have a kayak person of the year. In Greenland, the word is kayak, which is the overall combined scores, as a top man, top woman. So they just said for this thing at Delmarva, we'll score this like they do in Greenland. You get a certain number of points for first, second, and third place, and they add all that up, and whoever gets the most points. So when they added up, the person who they declared the winner was very surprised because they'd only done 3 of the events. But if nobody does all of them, or if you do all of them and you get 6th or 7th place, your score is really low. But if most people are only doing 3 or 4 of the events, you can just do 2 or 3. If you get like say 2 first places and 1 third or 4th place, you can get enough to win just the way it works out. So they were surprised that they were declared the winner. And actually they put some value to it, because usually they give it prizes for the winning in each event. A T-shirt or something. But they said for the winner will get the 4th pick in the final raffle. And the raffle, at Delmarva, there's a silent auction, a live auction, and a raffle. And the silent and live auction they do Saturday night, and the raffle, so they'll take some of the better donations and they put them all on a table. Some of them, really desirable, and some of them just little trinkets. And then the first raffle ticket chosen gets their first pick of the thing. And sometimes there'll be, like a free admission to some other kayak event will be up there, and that's pretty desirable. There'll be a nice Greenland paddle up there. So as the things disappear, then the next raffle ticket gets the pick of what's left. The winner of that got the 4th pick, which is still really good stuff up there. That was nice to have something somewhat significant, more significant than a T-shirt, say.
Nice. What were the nicest items available at the auction?
I'm trying to think. There was some nice paddles. There was I forget. Like when if it's nothing I want, I don't pay much attention to it. So
No one donated a kayak or.
No, because too often they don't get nearly what they're worth.
Oh yeah.
There were some other kayaks that they were looking for good homes outside next to the dining hall, and some of them actually were offered for free because they needed some work or something.
So did you get any comments on the Dubcast?
I did. People had watched it and enjoyed it. I interviewed some people with my recording equipment now, and so we'll get to some of those in the weeks to come.
Great. All right.
Some maybe I can get a full episode out of. Some others were shorter. So we'll hear from a guy. I think I mentioned his name once before. His name is Javier, and Javier is from Queens, New York, and he brought a friend there. So he's very enthusiastic about rolling, and he came with a guy named Mario. And in this new dining hall, they have a table on the side with a chess set. And a couple people were playing around, set up the pieces to play a game. And some people, they barely knew how to play chess. But then I saw Mario is playing Javier, a chess game. And I went over to watch. I play chess. I learned as a kid. I'm interested in chess. So I'm watching them play, and Javier is getting beaten pretty badly. Mario is tearing him up. So I said, yeah, I get the winner here. And so Javier loses. So I sit down and we start to play. And Javier says to me, Dubside, Javier, he's got this great Spanish accent, which I can't imitate, but he says, Dubside, if you lose this game, I will never listen to your podcast again. And he's been a big fan of the podcast. So I said, oh, you got the pressure's on now. You really got some weight to the outcome of this game. And so I didn't realize it, but this guy Mario is a pretty good chess player. I lost that game, unfortunately. Yeah, it was a slow crush of getting the advantage, and then I was playing defense the rest of the game and lost. But maybe next year I'll get a rematch.
All right.
So here we have for episode 33, we're going to listen back to some more from Brian Schulz, right?
Yes.
And there was another all traditional kayak event that took place. I think they did it for 5 years in California. This event was called TAKS, which stands for the Traditional Arctic Kayak Symposium. It was held in California for about 5 years. And that being out on the West Coast, that's a lot closer to Brian Schulz's neck of the woods. So he was there, and they had him talk one evening. He's a very entertaining presenter, so you'll get a taste of that here. And I was able to record the whole thing. I got a pretty good recording of it.
In this episode, he also mentions how he arranged a kayak log race. And I was actually involved in that race, and I took some video and made a little short video of it a long time ago, several years ago. But I'll put that link in the show notes.
All right, cool.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 33. In my personal archives, I have a recording from 2009 of Brian Schulz at an event that took place in California called TAKS. That's the Traditional Arctic Kayak Symposium, an event that went for about 5 years but is not held any longer. We've heard of and from Brian Schulz in previous Dubcasts. So here is some vintage Brian Schulz from more than 10 years ago. And as you can tell, he's a very entertaining guy. And maybe a few explanatory notes are in order. The BCU, he mentions, that's the British Canoe Union, a kayak organization that originated in the UK. And he mentions OOPS, which stands for OOPS, the Oregon Ocean Paddling Society. There's the name Wolfgang that comes up. Wolfgang was one of the organizers of that event, who was one of the well-known authorities on the Aleutian kayaks. And the other names that come up, there's Matt Brose, Harvey Golden, Adam Hansen. They're all luminaries in the kayak field, each with their own niche and perspective. Brian has some interesting things to say about navigation. He mentions that David Birch navigation book I've talked about before. This presentation was originally done as a slideshow, but it doesn't take too much away from it to just hear the audio. So here is Brian.
So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and my history with the sport and coming into skin boats, because I think I came into kayaking generally from a unique perspective, and just talk about what that's been for me and why it matters to me. And then for the second part of it, maybe tell you guys some amusing stories. I'm running out of these stories. I'm trying not to recycle too much old material, because all the good stories come from usually starts out, I did something really stupid. And as you get older, you're less and less inclined to do those things. So I still have a few stories I haven't told yet. If you saw this material at the Basque presentation, there's some new stuff in here, definitely some new photographs, and you can just pretend like you haven't heard it before. Okay. So, anyways, right before I came down here, the rivers were just starting to come up. I washed outside my workshop, and You know, it's a rainforest where I live, and I've just been watching and watching, and the rains were really starting to pour, and I've been waiting all year for the rivers to come up because they're all very rain-fed. And just as the rivers crested over the gravel, all the salmon started to run. We've had an exceptional salmon run this year, which I don't believe heralds the return of the salmon, but it was really beautiful to watch. And so this is what I would be doing this weekend if I wasn't talking to you guys. I sort of hate California, but what I really like is the way you guys drive. And I mean that sincerely, because in the Pacific Northwest, for God's sakes, and I mean maybe my soul came from the East Coast before I was incarnated here in Portland, Oregon, but you know, you're at a four-way intersection in Portland, and like one guy stops, and then the other guy stops, and you know, you got your Volvo and your little Beetle, and one guy's like, after you. No, after you. And it's the only place in the world where you'll see a traffic jam caused by that dynamic of friendliness, or the ultimate frustration, watching someone tentatively kind of ease their way onto a freeway on-ramp. Down here, it's like you have to have a friggin' plan. You're either getting on the freeway or you are not getting on the freeway. So I kind of enjoy driving down here because it's a little bit more engaging, and you kind of know that somebody's going to cut you off. You don't have to guess whether they're going to hang back. It gets really difficult to drive if you don't know where people are at. Okay, anyways. That's my kitten, Una. She's a little older now. A week after that photo was taken, she caught a full-size rabbit and ate 2/3 of it. Wow. And I thought we were going to take her to the vet. She was distended and hard. She slept for 12 hours, woke up, and ate the last third of it. This is one of the dangers of living on the North Oregon coast. And of course, you know, paddling where I do, you have to summon a lot of your Kundalini energy to bust out through the surf. So this is where I live. This is Manzanita, Oregon. It's right on the North Oregon coast, about 30 miles south of the confluence of the Columbia River. And the water temperature is about 45 degrees, 48 degrees year-round. There's no real protection on the North Oregon coast, which is a little frustrating because it makes it very difficult to get out through the surf. And there's really not a whole lot of people who paddle there. I've been paddling offshore for about 10 years, I think, on the North Oregon coast. And in that time, I have seen a total of, I think I've seen about, I think it was what, I don't know, at least 6, I think it was about 6 of those dudes. Anyways, in 10 years, I've seen 6 people, and they were all on the same day. These are people that I didn't personally invite out with me. And this is my safety kit here. You can see I've got all the important things covered. We've got some cheese stuff, potato chips, and some sardines, and a bottle of red wine, and some duct tape, and some Cliff bars, and a bottle of... So, you know, and there's a knife in there, too, which I think is important.
Brian, how large is Oops?
Oops?
Yeah.
Oops is an inland organization, mostly old guys. They don't really make it out to the coast much. I mean, they're really nice guys, and I know a lot of them, but I mean, down here, you guys have a lot more access to the open coast, and it's a lot more friendly. You get up into the northern Oregon and Washington, and it's really hard for people to develop that kind of a skill set just because you really have to be there and working on it all the time. Otherwise, it kind of kicks your ass a little bit. I was going to say that anybody that was wondering about the beard, you know I've changed my fashion look quite a bit in the last year, and I was going to make a comment about that, but the truth is I'm wanted by the BCU, and it turns out that an empty bottle of wine is not a Coast Guard approved flotation device. Okay, so back to the North Oregon coast. It only happens perfectly that the one day, I've got this beautiful new girlfriend, which is, she's a little older now, Lisa here, and I wanted to really impress her, and so I took her on a small day. I took her around the front of the headlands, and we stranded ourselves on this beautiful little beach. It's completely walled in by 500-foot tall cliffs, you know, and I've got all the important accessories that you saw earlier, and we're having a good moment, and I know that we're not going to get interrupted because I have never seen someone out here before in 10 years. Now, right at that moment, 5 guys, or 6 guys, whatever it was, come paddling around the corner and start eyeing our little beach, and I was like, oh my goodness. And so I had to think fast, and I was like, okay, I have an idea, quick. Take off your clothes, and that way these guys will not try to land and hang out with us. And I thought that was a pretty good plan. And you could see one of the guys offshore there. It indeed did work, and we were left alone for the afternoon. So my very first kayak was Dagger Crossfire. It was such an old kayak that you have to imagine it down there because I couldn't find a picture of it on the internet anymore. And this is about 12 feet long, 24 inches wide, 8 or 9 inches deep in the middle, and then tapering at the ends. Kind of looked like a banana. And I saw kayaking in a video somewhere on TV, and I was like, oh man, I got to do that. I was 19 years old. It looked like so much fun. I was in college. I was broke. I think I was cleaning McDonald's at night. And so I got on the classifieds, and I found a guy that had one for sale, and I got the Crossfire, a 90-degree feather aluminum tip paddle, a spray skirt, and float pegs for $250. And then I went to the local paddle shop, and I got the cheapest Stolquist dry top I could for $100. And then I went to Costco, and I got a Stern Shorty wetsuit for $60. And then I went to Value Village, and I got one of those big, poofy gangster jackets for, oh great. That's okay, I could say this while I'm fixing this. For just a few dollars. And then to top that all off, I got a ski vest, and I strapped it over that. And that was my immersion kit. And I got on the water and started teaching myself to paddle, because most of my friends would like to, smoke dope and play guitar. So I was just out there on the river myself, trying to learn how to paddle, trying to learn how to roll. And from those beginnings, I paddled all over the Pacific Northwest, met some people, got some friends who actually paddled, and paddled a bunch of rivers in that boat. And it was a really pretty versatile boat, good, decent whitewater boat, but it was long enough that you could use it as a sea kayak. And so I ended up taking it out through the San Juan Islands, up through British Columbia. I had a sleeping bag strapped on the back deck and some food stuffed into the ends, and that was my whole plan for a while. And I never really knew about this whole thing called sea kayaking. I mean, I saw the people, but I'd look at the gear and I'm like, I don't have $3,000. I drive a car that costs like $85 that I fixed myself, and so that's how I got started in sea kayaking. And I really took that gear all over the place, and eventually I moved to the beautiful little town on the North Oregon coast of Manzanita, and I just fell in love. And I had nothing but a truck and a surfboard that leaked, and I was just smitten by this gorgeous place. And I found this paddle shop, and they were looking for somebody. And I went in there, and they said to me, they're like, well, we're looking for somebody. And I'm like, I'm a kayaker. And they said, do you have a lot of sea kayaking experience? I'm like, yeah, I think so. And they said, well, do you have teaching experience? And not specifically, but I told them, yeah, I've got teaching experience. And they said, well, do you want to develop our instructor program? And I was like, I think I can do that. And all these things were complete lies. And so I went to the store, and I got all these books on sea kayaking. And I read them all, and it was kind of interesting to me because a lot of it didn't jive with just some of the common sense stuff that I've been working out for myself over the years. I found there was a lot of information on technique, but not a lot of information on fitness. There was a lot of information on getting yourself out of trouble, but really not a lot of emphasis on not getting into trouble in the first place. And I grew up on sailboats, and never did my dad say to me, we're just going to roll this sucker over, and then we're going to roll it back up and pump it out and swim to shore. And so my whole conception of what paddling was supposed to be was a little bit different. But I figured, these are the things I'm supposed to know, and these are the things I'm supposed to be teaching people. So I got a buddy of mine at that point who had his own kayak, and we headed out there, and we tried to do all these things in the book. And a lot of them, come on. We'll fix it.
You want to try the remote, maybe?
That's okay, we got it. And we're out there, and a lot of it's just not working. Trying to do the T-rescues and all the paddle flow re-entries, and we're losing gear like crazy, and the kayaks are swamping, and it was just a disaster. And But you know, I finally got to where we could do this stuff reasonably well out there, along with our regular roles and stuff like that, and then we took it back, and I started. And one of the things that was really frustrating for me, I think, was a lot of the emphasis on navigation. And this has gotten better in kayaking, but at the time, you know, there was David Birch's tome on kayak navigation, which is essentially navigation gear stolen from the sailing world. And sailboat navigation and kayak navigation are utterly different. I mean, I would say that a lot of it is just complete bullshit. Because you don't... trying to follow a compass course on a needle that's swinging 35 degrees and plotting it with a chart that's sliding around in a chart case and China markers that are smearing all over the place, it just seems to more obfuscate the point of navigation, which is to know where you are and get yourself to somewhere else safely, than to actually, you feel like you're playing with navigation as opposed to actually doing it. You know, I find most of the navigation that I do is, I want to go over there and I can see the thing I'm trying to go to, and you know, I always try to give myself a huge margin of error because kayak navigation is not all that precise. So I entered at that point in my life what I call the Rambo phase of sea kayaking, where I felt like everyone should be trained to the gills to get into a kayak. And I mean, I'm sure we've met I'm sure you guys have all met this incorrigible individual who thinks that you should have like a full dry suit and a PFD and a helmet and, you know, 5 years of training before you take your recreational kayak across the bay. And you know, I espouse this philosophy vigorously, you know, to everyone I met, and I really tried to train people to be drown proof, and I realized that, you know, most people really don't need that. And a lot of people, you know, spend a lot of time looking a lot like that at my behest when they really could have just followed this very simple plan, which is how I teach now. Have a plan, practice your plan under controlled conditions, and then modify your plan to make it work. You know, if you want to be next to shore, paddling in a t-shirt with no PFD, and you're a good swimmer, and you're 10 feet offshore, and the water's at 80 degrees, I think that's a good plan. Try your plan. And if it works, you know, then you've got a good plan. And just make sure that anytime you deviate from those parameters, you make sure that you know what you're doing. Because safety is one of those very interesting things. Safety is... there was recently a great book by Gonzalez, I think his name was, written called Deep Survival, and he talked about the correlation between people that were actually trained in safety situations versus how likely they were to survive. And well, what happened is he realized that really there wasn't a statistical correlation between how safe or unsafe they weren't and how much safety training they had. He found that the most important thing in being safe or not was your ability to assess each situation individually and to be flexible during that moment. And, you know, when you're out in conditions, you know, the most important thing, I think, is just making sure that you're making really good conservative judgments, that you're not taking a lot of unnecessary risks. So there's so many things that tempt you to do things that are weird. A friend, a camera. I tend to kayak a lot alone because alone really brings it home to you. Like, I'm alone out here. And when you're with a buddy, you feel safe, even if that buddy may or may not be able to help you out. Okay. Sorry. We're almost... There we go. So, another thing that I realized is that a lot of what's out there really didn't address what I wanted to do as a kayaker, because there's so many other cool things to do out there, you know, and there's the whole sea kayak set and the whitewater guys, and I found myself doing all kinds of stuff that maybe wasn't, you know, in the mainstream of kayaking. You know, a lot of exploring and a lot of really rough conditions, checking out sea caves, a lot of surfing, kiting with the kayak, hunting for really cool pieces of driftwood on the bay, looking for weird things to eat and subsequently eating them. I do a lot of fishing offshore where I live. There's not a lot of fish anymore, but we still pull one up once in a while. This is not your average sea kayaking deck kit. So this is, you know, this is kind of what we do offshore, me and my buddy Zach, and we're pretty much the entire sea kayaking population of Manzanita, Oregon. And a lot of it really revolves around getting stuff to eat. I just love being out in my kayak and catching a fish and reeling it up and being part of that whole cycle of life. Something we've been doing a lot of lately is a lot of crabbing, and that's been really a lot of fun. That's Zach's Nordcap. We're always he's always making fun of me for the skin boats and the Greenland paddle, and I'm always giving him hell for his Nordcap and his Euro paddle. And now this is a great picture because I'm like, Zach, take a picture of this crab. Let's make it look like it's attacking my face. This is a classic idiotic moment. You see what it's got my head? 1 second later, I'm like, Christ, get it off, get it off. Another thing that I'm really keen on is salvaging logs by kayak. We have a lot of stuff that flushes down the rivers. There's not a whole lot of it left, but every time there's a flood, there's usually this or that. I'm a builder. I've built a lot of things over the years, not just kayaks. And this last winter, I put a lot of work with me and my buddy Mark into breaking up a couple big log jams and trying to get the stuff out of them. I've gotten a lot of grief for this particular picture, and I'm not going to apologize for not having glasses on because I'd much rather see what I'm doing than cut off my foot. And as far as the earmuffs, I forgot to bring the earmuffs, so that's how that is. And I invited all my friends together, and we had a race, and got a lot of great people, from all over the Northwest to come and be in this ridiculous race. It was the world's slowest race. We divided it into teams, and we towed these logs 3 miles, 4 miles down the river. It took us all afternoon, and then we all went out for pizza, and I gave away a kayak at the end. These are the logs that we got. These are the ones we managed to bring home. There's a whole raft of cedar logs that someone actually stole, which really frustrated me. But those ones did make it home. That's a Sitka spruce tree. And then here's me stripping the bark off some cedars. Now these didn't come from the water. These actually came from kayak building students. One of the warnings, if you ever come up and build a kayak with me, I live on a farm and I've always got lots of projects, and so oftentimes it'll be the end of the day and I'm like, hey, we've got 8 guys here. I know it would be fun. Let's go into the woods and carry these cedar logs out. So these logs are the corner posts of, I'm currently about halfway done with a traditional Japanese house built out of all kayak salvaged wood and kayak student salvaged wood. And there's no pictures of that in here because if you ever want to see it, you have to come up and see it. Okay. Other things, exploring ships, old rusted ships. That was on Staten Island. Now, I got into skin-on frame, as these things want to have happen. I met this girl, and she was building a kayak. This was years and years ago, and I felt kind of guilty, because I could never finish my Nick Shada strip-built kayak, and I always had this kind of hole in my life, like I'm never going to be anybody. I couldn't even finish my kayak. And she was building this Badarka, and I was like, hey, we can do this, as excited as you would be in those situations. And over the next month, we knocked one of these out. We had Wolfgang's book, and I did a terrible job. I mean, you couldn't do worse than I did on that first kayak. It weighed like 50 pounds, and it was a mockery of what Wolfgang was trying to impress in that book. But after we were done, and after that month, I was like, this thing is cool. It paddles like hell. I mean, I can't stand paddling it, but it is really pretty neat. And I'm going to try to make another one. And I built the other one. It took, come on, wake up. The next one that I built took 2 weeks, and I paddled like shit too. And then I built 3 more of them in the next 3 weeks. And the 5th one that I built kind of paddled okay. And I mean, I was really kind of getting bitten by the bug because I'm like, I can afford this. For the first time in my life, I can afford to be a sea kayaker, and if I'm lucky, maybe I'll actually build one that doesn't completely suck. And I started getting into the whole culture of it, and it was really fun because, unlike the other boats I've been paddling, which were always borrowed, the sea kayaks, that is, I could actually have my own boat and I could carry my own boat, which was huge. And that really set me free to go to a lot of places that you really couldn't, with like a 70-pound boat on your shoulder. And they were just really beautiful to me. I mean, the aesthetic is very, very attractive. And there's just all these moments in building your own boat where you have this connection to it, and you really realize how much currency erases us from all the cool things that could be happening in our lives, And so it was really fun, and I started hanging out with all the people that did this and going to these events, and I noticed when I got to the events that it was really all about rolling and rolling and rolling, and I mean it was a bunch of really great guys, and I mean I thought the rolling thing was pretty cool because I didn't have a very good roll, and in whitewater, which I do a lot of, if 20 guys go over a waterfall, I will always be the guy behind the waterfall getting pounded. It's just been my bad luck for my entire life. I have the worst karma in the world as far as getting beaten up behind waterfalls and in holes and under ledges and things like that. And I found that starting out and getting into this whole Greenland rolling thing was very fruitful for me in my whitewater kayaking, because suddenly I was disconnecting those panic responses that you get when you're in an uncomfortable situation underwater, and that's not stuff that you can cognitively work on. That's core brainstem stuff. And so I was really opening my mind up and able to understand what was happening under there kinesthetically, spatially, and realizing, okay, I'm getting pounded, the wall is that way, the waterfall is this way, I might be able to come up this way, with my behind the neck leaning roll, and you do all these Greenland rolls, and you realize when you're underwater getting beaten up in a hole, you are almost always set up for some sort of Greenland roll. And so the Greenland rolling really gave me a lot. But I wasn't entirely convinced that I was super stoked on the Greenland boats, because I was still trying to build a skin boat that didn't piss me off. Because I built the boats in Wolfgang's book, and those weren't working for me. And then I started building these boats from all the other books, and those weren't working. And then I started going to my friend Harvey's house, and I'd look at his historical drawings, and I'd build those boats, and everybody was like, "Oh man, these boats are great," and I'm like, "Have you paddled these boats? These boats are infuriating." And I just could not understand why these traditional boats, weren't working out for me in a recreational sea kayaking context. And I realized at some point I went offshore, and I think this was I'm a kind of a slow learner. I was offshore with a guy named Charles Harris, a really kind of strong bass paddler, and he was up visiting me, and I was in a Greenland boat, and I went over the falls on this big wave, and it hit me, and I was in the Greenland boat, and my whole boat was like all lateral surface area stuck under the water, and it slammed me hard enough that it broke all the ribs, not all of them, but about a third of them down the lower left side of my body, and I wrapped around the boat and crashed my head in and got like a semi-concussion. And it was just kind of a bad scene, and I rolled up and I lost my paddle, and I was really pissed off about that. And I got home and I was thinking about that whole thing, and ribs don't hurt till the next day, so it wasn't that big of a deal then. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, maybe these boats weren't designed for surfing on the Oregon coast. And that was a huge watershed experience for me, because I was like, these don't have to be Greenland kayaks. I mean, we can let them be Greenland kayaks. I mean, because they were designed to hunt. I mean, say like Kanagaquak was out there, and his buddy Uktak, and they're paddling along, and Uktak got this boat that surfs really well, but it makes a nice little bow gurgle, like most of our conventional sea kayaks do. Well, yeah, he had a better time paddling, but he didn't come home with any seals either. And so, really the boats were copied from generation to generation. I mean, it was messy. Evolution isn't always linear, A lot of times you just did what your dad did, and then a lot of other times you did, what got the most meat. And so I really diverged in my thinking about boats and started really doing a lot of experimentation with the skin boats. And I started building boats over and over and over, and started copying commercial boats that I liked and designing my own boats. And that really set me free to really enjoy the historic boats, because they didn't have to be the best kayak in the world. I got to really enjoy what they were for what they were. And I just really blossomed from there. And after about a year of building these, I built about 30 of them or so. And I thought to myself, but I've always been a teacher in one capacity or another. I bet you people would really like to come do this. And so I started up a little school, and we started building some boats. And this has really been the gift of this whole thing for me, is the people that I meet. I meet all kinds of people, all very different walks of life, from all over the place. I had one guy come from Dubai, and he says, the Arabs get a real kick out of it because every time he goes in through the surf, he falls out of his boat and they all laugh. And just people from all over the place. This gal, one of the best lines I've ever heard in a class: "I'm going to aqua seal your mouth shut." Not said to me. She embroidered this really cool thing on her boat. And that's the guy from Dubai. And, there's just this levity in the skin boat community that I really haven't encountered in kind of the mainstream kayaking community. I mean, there's definitely a lot of cool people. And if you're attracted to kayaks, you're generally all right. But the skin boat people are especially cool because there's just this culture of giving and inclusiveness and kindness, that's very cool. And people just willing to do all kinds of different stuff. So, building boats over the years, I've just been designing all kinds of cool stuff and really just let my imagination go free with it. Building, Bidarkas, historic boats, double Bidarkas, East Greenland boats. I'm really sad I couldn't have this boat here this week. I was really sick, and I sold the one I had, so I was trying to finish another one for this weekend. Racing kayaks, building boats out of kind of like driftwood and stuff like that, and trying to learn how to split out cedar, and it's slow, but it's a lot of fun. And taking fiberglass kayaks and chopping them up. I brought this boat if anybody wants to try it. This is a modified squirt boat that I've been messing with to surf. This is my Necky Jive. I had a couple of them, so I thought I'd mess with this one. I filled it with boiling water and drove over the back of it with my truck, and that really flattened out all that annoying tail rocker. And then I attached some fin boxes to the bottom, and that really makes it surf a lot better. Canoes, and this is one of my favorite boats. It's an Adirondack guide boat. It's a copy of a historic guide boat that I made in skin on frame. I do a lot of salmon fishing out of that. This is a sailboat that I built. This is although the wooden boat guys don't want to admit this design, although his was plywood, not skin on frame, is the very last design that Joel White put pen on paper to before he died. Outrigger sailing canoe. This one didn't go so well. And this guy here. This guy's one of my big inspirations as a kayak designer. His name's Bob Livingston, and Bob, sorry I don't have a face shot of him, but Bob's a radiologist, lives up in Washington, owns a place down in Manzanita, and I didn't meet Bob till just a couple of years ago, but Bob was the guy that was paddling in the 1980s down the Washington coast with Matt and Cam Bros with all these weird kayaks that Bob was designing, and he's the guy that gave them the idea to build the Mariner coaster with a boat that he had built called the Ursa 456 or something like that. And so far they'd had the Mariner design. It was a big, long design, and he was out there keeping up with them in this little 13-foot guy that he designed and having what seemed like a lot of fun, too. And it just really started Cam Bros' imagination going and led him to design the coaster. Bob actually has a lot of really cool little boats, little one-off boats that, he's got money, so he just pays people to build them after he designs them. He has one boat that looks like a coaster, but it has a hump on the back deck. It's coming. Come on. It has a hump on the back deck like a camel, and you can't capsize it. And so it doesn't interfere in the wind. It seems to paddle really good. It's a lot of fun. But, I mean, God knows that you'd never sell a single sea kayak with a hump on the back deck like a camel. This is my baby. Over the years, I've been working on a skin-on-frame version of the Mariner coaster, and I called Matt Bros and asked him if I could kind of use the design directly because I was already headed there in my design work, and I just thought I could save myself some time by just copying it. And I don't think he thought I was actually going to do it, so he was fine to let me do it. And then I actually did it, and did it pretty well, and they were a little more cool about it. But we're all happy and friends now. And it was really kind of cool because I managed to do a pretty good job of copying the shapes of the Mariner coaster, but I fixed some things that annoyed me about it, like it was just a little squirrely in a following sea, and so I skegged it out just a touch, and I was able to make it really small for real small gals, where they're kind of swimming in a coaster, and I was able to make really big ones for big guys, and it's been a lot of fun working with this design over the years and just trying to tweak it and get to know it and try to make it better over time. Just a couple more of those same boats. That's up in Alaska. Same boat. And then recently what I've been working on, and this is actually my working plan, is a little skin boat that is kind of like a sea kayak in the front and a surf kayak in the back, something that might actually go through a chop okay, but would be really fun when you get it onto a wave and you could, really crank really hard top and bottom turns and get a lot more surf kayak performance out of it. And I'm sad to say that I'm kind of giving up on this. I've built about 10 of these in the last 6 months, and I got it to where it really did rip pretty hard, but I would still rather be in a fiberglass international class boat, probably something I would design. And I think that's the most important thing about, building your own boats, is not falling in love with your own ideas and always being willing to say, maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree here.
Was that because of the rigidity?
There's a lot of issues. I mean, I could go on at length about it, and I won't right now. But I mean, I kept tweaking it, and I mean, I got it to where it would do what I wanted on a wave, but I could never get it to do what I wanted it to out in the ocean. And as far as being a hybrid kayak, and so I won't go too much into the details, but I'll probably design a plywood version or something like that at some point in the future, as soon as I recover from the financial hit of building like a gazillion. If you want one, they're up at my shop. First person to drive up there, you don't have to ask, just pick one up. There's a lot of them. So, it's been about the boats for me a lot over the last years, but anymore it's really about the people. Just being able to interact with so many people and being able to really listen to people, because the cool thing about interacting with people constantly and what I do is that, most people have some kind of good idea, and if you just listen to other people, it's amazing how fast you can improve your product. Because as a skin boat builder, if somebody says, let's try it this way, and then we try it that way, and it looks better than my way, well then boom, that's the way we do it from now on. And I don't have to build a whole nother mold like a fiberglass paddler and fiberglass kayak designer, and it really allows me to integrate people's ideas really quickly, which is a lot of fun for me. And really, the product becomes something that is the collective heart of so many people's work. That guy is Adam Hansen. He's a Greenlander. I met him at Delmarva last week, and he insisted on making me this harpoon, and I told him I don't really need a harpoon, but everybody else seems to have a harpoon, so I guess it's cool that I have one now too, and it's made all accurately and stuff, so I can learn to harpoon things. Okay. Great guy. Smoked constantly. I'll tell you, no one can smoke like the Greenlanders can smoke. I haven't had a cigarette in 12 years, and after a week of hanging out with Adam, I'm like, God, maybe I should start smoking again. That looks really good. And no, I don't actually. I wish it didn't come in. I didn't ship it back to myself in time. And just this last year, people have been really hard up for cash, and so I've done something I haven't done in years past. I've taken a lot of people on trade, and if they weren't able to pay to come up and take a class, just skills. This guy's from Montana. He's a timber framer. He's kind of your classic Montana timber framer looking guy, and him and a bunch of other people have helped me this year work on the Japanese house, and it's just been really nice to make those exchanges. I mean, I still need to make enough money to pay my mortgage, but anymore, money just seems to be kind of a losing proposition, because you don't really have any control about how valuable it is or isn't at any given moment. Whereas when you trade with someone for something, you look at the thing, they look at the thing, you decide what it's worth, and nobody in Chase Manhattan's taking a cut of it. And so I really appreciate doing as much trade as I can. Those are kelp horns, by the way. If you take bull kelp and dry it out, you can make a really fun little horn. And these are, this is, I guess it's kind of corny to end this part of it with kids, but, it's really important that we raise our kids in skin boats, because then they won't grow up in the BCU, and they won't have to spend a bunch of money, and they won't have to turn into yuppies, and they can still enjoy kayaking. So that's I'm going to tell you guys some stories after this, but for a minute, I'll give you guys a chance to ask questions if you want. Anyone?
All right. The stories we'll maybe save for another time. But there you have one of the more unique characters in the Greenland paddling community, Brian Schulz. Well, I've gone beyond the usual target of 30 minutes, or I should say Brian has gone beyond that. So I'll skip the Greenlandic music stuff that I do normally. We'll just let Brian have the entire spotlight for now. And Brian has certainly had a distinguished career with kayaks, some amazing experiences. And what he said, one thing he said in there that I resonated quite well with me. So at this point, I've been kayaking, it's about 25 years now. And I've gone to places all over the world, some very exotic and exciting locations. And I've probably used many thousands of dollars worth of equipment, some well-made stuff, some not so well-made stuff. And I've been to less than inspiring places and had tough times and good times. But as per what Brian says, with all that said, what it's really about is the people that you meet. And, kayaking has introduced me to folks all over the world who are now my good friends, my kayak family, if you will. And that's what I value the most. It's not the gear, it's not the places, it's the people. Next time in Dubcast 34, I will look at what happens when a competitor finds that they are too good, that they have won at the highest levels. Where can you go from there?